Hey everyone, this is a clip from a recent episode of Another Pass, where we talk about movies and all the struggles that go into making them. If you like it, check out the whole podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts. It's fun that we've talked about Arnold Schwarzenegger a lot on this podcast, and several times for fifth episodes, because I think he had a perception at the time of being, because he's big Jack guy with a thick accent, like not the sharpest crayon in the toolbox, but he is in fact like very cunning in terms of like what projects he always wanted to work on. And I have heard that at this point the accent is just affect because it makes his persona easier to sell. And you can see that like he has a habit of picking really clever projects and then putting himself in there and having them be really good for his career. Like this is a good bounce back for Schwarzenegger, along with then doing T2 the following year, that really cemented him going into the 90s as still like a viable action actor.
Yeah, he knew his limitations. He knew exactly where he couldn't go, but he knew what would be conducive to his vibe.
Yeah.
Especially in the late 80s, early 90s, I don't think anybody, aside from maybe Tom Cruise, was picking more appropriate projects for them to actually execute.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. More on brand. He's definitely one of the people that understood who he was and how he would fit into spaces and how he could make room for himself in some projects more than probably anyone else.
Like I said, this ultimately became Schwarzenegger's baby, but he actually came on the project relatively late. It was only in like 87 that I think he became attached to the movie. And this movie had started pre-production in 1974, which is just kind of, it's such a huge timeline. It took 16 years for the movie to get made.
Yeah.
So at that point, one of the producers, Shusett, who also has a writing credit, had optioned the story because he liked it. He saw it in an anthology magazine and thought it would make for a good script. And he brought on Dan O'Bannon. So these two ultimately would table this project after working on it for a couple of years to go work on the first Alien movie. But when they were working on this, it was a difficult process because the short story was like 23 pages. And in terms of like making it into a script, it really only covered the details that they could fit into the first act. So that means that Act 2 and 3 are just complete inventions, which I find like just fascinating in terms of how much of this movie there is. Like everything from when he arrives on Mars past is like completely created for this movie.
That's the thing, like you couldn't tell. I don't think anybody that went to go see this movie probably read the short story, but if you looked at it and you saw, oh, based on a Philip K. Dick story, you would assume, based on this movie, oh, all of this is in there. So the fact that it's not actually speaks a lot to Shusett and O'Bannon and their ability to take something that was not originally theirs, but put enough of their own spin on it so that it feels cohesive.
Yeah, and like obviously you can go back and really fill in the details. Like they start talking about Quato early on. They start like laying all the stuff for Mars, and that's stuff that like was hinted at in the short story. It just didn't actually happen in the short story. So it's like, okay, now let's get him to Mars. Get your ass to Mars is such a famous quote from this movie.
Yeah.
So Quato is not in the story?
No, he was a creation for that happens much later.
Well done, gentlemen, because oh my God, Quato is the best.
Remember, if you like that clip, check out the podcast. You can find it at certainpov.com or wherever you get your podcasts.